All right. So over the last couple of weeks, we've looked at quite a bit of stuff. We've dove into a lot of different tools. We've gotten hopefully familiar with the environment that we're going to be working in for the next couple of weeks at least. 3-4 weeks, whatever's, I think we got 8 left in the semester. 8 or 9, something like that. The semester's going by fast, isn't it? So today you are going to begin working on a chess set. Very quickly, I'm going to go over that. And then I'm going to go over a few of the things that I use to make my chess set. Now, the only major idea that I'm going to introduce this week that is new is going to be called the Pro Boolean. Now, Pro Boolean allows us to combine 2 or more different shapes in interesting ways. And I will show you a good example of those. I do have an older tutorial down here at the bottom that you are more than welcome to watch. And I'm going to go through the basic steps of how to build a traditional chess set. Not something like what I've got here, which is my City of Wichita. So each of these little objects here that I have are going to be editable poly objects. Now, to make things nice and easy, I've used the editable poly modifier, which we looked at last week. And again, the nice thing about that is that's temporary. So if I decide I don't like what I've done, I can just get rid of that. And that's what I originally started with, was just a sphere. And I made that sphere into this object here. I did that by using the tools that we've discussed so far, such as on the polygon selection mode, I did some extrusion. Let's go ahead and isolate this object so it's easier to see. So I scaled part of it down and flattened it. Now technically, I have a lot of different elements in here too, so that is just a separate piece, but it does what I want it to right there. These are technically separate pieces. Okay, now I made these by creating an arc and then bending it. Go ahead and get out of editable poly there. We're going to look at the Garvey Center in particular, because that one was pretty fun to build. So everybody recognize this building from downtown? It usually has some lights on it here. They're usually blue of some sort. It's a pretty iconic building as far as it's part of the Wichita skyline. Again, I started off with just a box. I started off with this piece right here. And then I built additional pieces. So I'm going to go through the whole process of how I built that. And that's going to introduce the idea of the Pro Boolean to you as well. So if I were doing this real and true, I would make sure that this is the exact size I want it to be. But since I'm in kind of a hurry, I'm not going to sweat it too much. And we'll just say it's 10 units by 10 units. I'm using centimeters and 6 centimeters tall. I would recommend you go ahead and use centimeters for this particular project, and the reason for that is if your pieces come out good enough, I am very inclined to print them on my 3D printer. I will not print your entire set just because I can't, but if you have a really good looking king or your pawn or something like that, comes out really nice, we can definitely print you guys a copy and print myself a copy. The reason I want you to work in centimeters is because the machine likes things in metric. It technically wants things in millimeters. But if we work in centimeters, I can convert that over to millimeters for you when we go to print them. So try to build real world sizes. Now, it's kind of hard to think sometimes how big a centimeter is. 2.5 centimeters equals 1 inch, roughly. Okay, so everybody knows what an inch is, or at least we should. Okay, so I'm working in centimeters. So this is going to be my first piece. This is going to be the base. And then I've got the bit on top. So I'm going to use AutoGrid so that when I go ahead and build this piece, it just positions itself on top of the piece I already have. Using my Align tool, I'm just going to align the center to the center on the X and the Y. And now I come to my first bit. The Garvey Center has these very interesting little cutouts. When you go to do this, I highly recommend you Google whatever it is you're building. And just find yourself some reference images. But it's got these interesting cutouts here on the sides. Well, this is not super hard to do, but it's not super easy either. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this, and then I'm going to make it smaller. Now, oftentimes when I'm modeling, I tend to work with a single block, and I just make lots of copies of that same block, or at least when I'm starting out. Let's go 6 by 6 by 17. Nope. 1. Sorry. I say I'm not going to sweat the sizes, but then I do anyway. So we're going to make this 2 by 2 by 18. Now what I want to do is I'm going to take this cube right here, the one that I have selected, and I'm going to line it up so that it lines up on this corner right here for me. And I'm going to do that with my Align tool again. When I first do it, it wants to align pivot point to pivot point, or center to center, because that's what I've told it. I'm going to change that, and we're going to say pivot point to pivot point, or pivot point to minimum. Okay. Notice where it has put it now. And in the beginning, this is just guesswork, trying to figure out where you want it to go. But you get better at it the more you do it. So now I have them on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and just make another copy of that. Use my Align tool again. And in this case, we're going to say that one. Very good. One more. Let's turn that off. Okay, so apply there, fine. Y. There we go. Okay, so like I said, in the beginning, sometimes that's takes some guessing to figure out exactly where you need it to go. Now I'm going to grab all 4 of these and I'm going to slide them down just a little bit. That's why I made them a little longer than my original box. Let's go ahead and hide all that. So that, notice how they overlap a bit at the top as well as the bottom. Now here comes the magic bit. I am going to take the center box. This is the box that I want to have left. This is the piece that I want to have left. And I'm going to go to my Create panel, and under Standard Primitives, where it says Standard Primitives, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go down to what is called Compound Objects. When we think about compound objects, think about compound words. Compound words are words that are made up of 2 or more words. Compound objects are the same thing. They're just made of 2 or more objects. Towards the end of the semester, we'll talk about the rest of these, but for now, we're going to look at just the ProBoolean. Pro-Boolean and Boolean are kind of the same thing, but avoid using Boolean whenever possible and try to use pro-Boolean. Pro-Boolean is going to allow me to connect or to subtract one object from another. Now in this particular case, and you'll want to do some reading up on this, but these are the different operations that we can do. I can union them together if I want. I can leave just the intersection. I can subtract, I can merge, and so on. For subtraction is what we want. So I'm going to make sure subtraction is set up. And then I'm going to go up where it says pick Boolean and start picking. Now as I pick these, you'll see they disappear, but they also remove part of the Boolean that's left. Let me show you another example of this that might be a little better. Everybody knows what the bishop looks like, right? Got the teardrop shaped head with the slice out of the back of it. So I'll show you. So again, I'm going to go back to my standard primitives. I am going to go ahead and create a sphere because that's going to be the base of my bishop's head. This is a good one because it uses everything that we've used so far. Let's go ahead and taper this guy. We're going to taper it down so it's kind of got that bishop shape to it. At the very least, I'm going to go ahead and stretch it up a little bit. So now I've kind of got that bishop head shape going. Just to sell it a little more, let's go ahead and make a copy. And then I am going to get rid of the taper as well as reset my, okay, never mind, forget that. We're going to make a new one because I messed up when I scaled it. But I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's align that. Gotta love that align tool, guys. Learn it. And we're going to bring it up. So everybody knows the part I'm talking about, right? If not, please say something. But you can kind of tell what that is, hopefully. Now the thing about the bishop is the bishop always has that little cutout in the back of his head. And if we want to, again, there is absolutely no shame in having to look at a reference. So chess pieces reference. So this is what I'm talking about, that little cutout right there. We're going to do that with a Boolean. So the basic shape of that is just going to be a little square thing. Here I go with that align tool again. And so now I need to make it a little bigger. Let's go ahead and make it a little taller. Give it a bit of a rotation. And then we'll even make it a little fatter. All right. So what I'm going to do is going to make this piece into a Boolean, and I'm going to remove this section from it. Booleans are really, really powerful. We will revisit them again later when we come back and do compound objects again. And I'll show you some other cool stuff that you can do with them. But for now, I want you to know that you can use them to cut holes in your model. And that's all you really need to know at this point. So again, to make an object into a Boolean or a pro-Boolean, I'm going to go to Compound Objects, Pro-Boolean. I'm going to check the operation first. So operation, I want to subtract, start picking, and now I have created that. Okay? Easy. Takes practice though. That's the thing. It takes practice. You got to do it a bunch. Make sure you right click to get out of the picking so you don't add more and more pieces. Now, if I was doing this for real and true, the next step would be to take this object, which is a pro Boolean, and I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. Remember, converting it to an editable poly is very, very similar to using the edit poly modifier, except for the fact that it is now permanent. The reason I would want to make it an editable poly is because I have an attach tool that only comes with editable polys. And now I can attach that piece. That way it's all one piece.
Did you hit delete to get rid of the square?
Say what now?
Do you hit delete to get rid of the square?
No, what I did was
Automatically do it.
when I use it to cut the hole,
Yeah.
technically it's still there. It just, we don't see it anymore. Okay, so again, I don't want to get too far into all the nuts and bolts of editable polys, but I'll show you something. Okay, so let me go ahead and just make this a little smaller. Okay, so I'm going to cut the little bit out of the big box. Okay, so again, I'm going to grab my box. I'm going to go over to my Create panel, Compound Objects, Pro Boolean. Now when I say start picking, it's going to cut that out for me. But, like I said, technically it's still there. It's just that we don't see it. It's called an operand at this point. And so now if I come down here, I can select the box. I can select that box, and if I want to, I can make it bigger or smaller. So again, Booleans will blow your mind. But what I need you to understand is that you can use it to punch a hole in something. Okay, that's the main purpose right now. Later on, I'll show you how we could actually animate this once we get a little farther on. But I want you to, if you decide to go ahead and make a traditional chess set, I want you to be able to cut that hole in the bishop's head. Okay, so back to my Garvey Center. Hopefully that kind of helps with the Booleans there. They're pretty powerful, and I do link to the help files. We'll almost always link to the help files from Autodesk, guys. That's your new best friend as you're learning this program. Because again, once you get out of my class, once you get out in the workforce, it's going to be up to you to constantly be learning new stuff. You know, when you guys walk by my office and I'm sitting there and I'm staring intently at my computer, you know what I'm doing? I'm brushing up on this. I'm probably working in Animate, or I'm working in 3ds Max, or if it's a really good day, I'm doing stop motion animation. But the rest of the time, I am just constantly trying to keep up with what is coming out. And it gets harder every year. All right, so here's my Garvey Center, though. Now, the next bit that we're going to look at, if we bring up the Garvey Center, is we have this interesting little part right here, okay, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-sided. Well, how can I make that shape? Well, we haven't done a whole lot with this yet, but we have our splines, or our shapes, in the next panel of the Create panel. And in this case, I'm going to create an n-gon. An n-gon is simply a multi-sided shape. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. I'm going to jump over to my modify panel, and I'm going to go ahead and increase my bits to 8 sides. Let's rotate this. I'm going to go ahead and leave snapping turned on so I can rotate. Actually, I lied. I'm going to go ahead and turn that snapping off because it doesn't want to go where I want it to. There we go. Let's use that align panel again. So we're just going to align my object up to there. We'll say center, center. And we can see that, first off, it's not quite big enough, but that's okay. Because this n-gon, I can now convert into an editable spline. And when I do that, that gives me access to the vertices. Now we do have one little problem. Do you guys know what a Bezier curve is?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay. Whenever we're dealing with curves like this inside 3ds Max or anything that's vector based, okay, so like Adobe Animate, when we have a curve or a corner, they come in 2 different flavors usually. Now this is what is called a Bezier, and that means I have these handles. Exactly. So I can grab these handles and move them around. The problem is with the handles, it's going to curve. So if I Control Z to undo this, now I can grab each of these corners, and if I right click on it, and right clicking is very powerful in 3ds Max because it allows me to access a lot of hidden menus. This particular menu is called the quad menu. And this comes up whenever I select something in my viewport. The quad menu has a lot of really handy tools that you use a lot, such as hide all or unhide all, or really powerful one, select similar. So if you have all of your of one particular type of object is the same color and you say select similar, it will select all of those objects that are red or blue or green. Great way to grab lots of things. We're getting off topic though, lots of tools over here. On the other side though, it talks about the different types of corners. Currently this is a Bezier corner, meaning I have those handles that I can play with, and that's going to modify the curve. I don't want a curve. I just want a corner. So I'm going to set that to be just a corner. Now I'm not 100%, but I think I can probably highlight all of them since I'm in vertex mode, right click on one of them and set them all to be corners. Now the reason I did that was I want to bring this out and I want that to stay straight. So notice how it's not bending like it did last time. And this is just one of those things that I discovered, unfortunately, through trial and error. And I'm just trying to save you guys some of those errors. Now I am going to go ahead and just grab all of them this time, and I'm going to scale them upwards. Maybe not. Maybe that's not what I want. Here, let's try this. Let's grab the segments, and then I can scale them. Oh, perfect. That's what I wanted. Okay. So I'm going to exit out of that sub-selection mode, and now I have this non-renderable shape. Well, hopefully we remember back to when we first started going over modifiers. One that I talked about was the shell modifier. I love the shell modifier. It's going to make my one-dimensional object three-dimensional. It's going to give it volume. So now I'm starting to get that shape of that building down. This last bit's the easiest bit. I simply need to go to my standard primitives, and let's go ahead and just make a box. Make sure that I got auto grid turned on. And so now there is,
How did you get that little green ball?
what, the green ball?
The one where your zoom focuses around?
Oh,
Cause I had to close out my whole auto thing already because it got messed up.
that's just my
Whole
zoom.
thing just disappeared?
No, it's just like that green ball on the side, it like somehow ended up slightly to the right, so every time I like,
Okay, one of the things you want to do, if you come down and look at these tools down here, okay? One of them is orbit sub-object. So if I click and hold, there are different things. So I could say orbit. Now this is just gonna orbit probably just around the middle. See, and I don't like the way that does that. But if I come down here and say orbit sub-object, and man, I never use those tools. You orbit by pressing Alt and Control and middle mouse button at the same time. Actually, that's a lie. You orbit with Alt and Control. But it, by default, at least the way mine is set up, is I always orbit around the object that I have selected. Because I know it looks like the object's moving, but it's not. The camera is. The object isn't rotating. The camera's moving around it. And as far as that little line, dude, that is simply when I go to zoom, that's Alt and Control middle mouse button at the same time. And then sometimes you'll end up like this, and there's no shame in that. Then it means I'm upside down. Okay, so just come up here and click on the little home button. Boom. Okay, so once I got all my parts together, now I need to put them into an editable poly. And the reason for that is I don't want to have to select all of these pieces every time I want to move them. So again, I want you to get in the habit of doing this, but I'm going to start with the base. I'm going to apply my Edit Poly modifier to it, and then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to find my attach. And I'm going to attach these pieces. Now, we talked last week, I believe it was last week when we introduced these for the most part, but our shape here, our model is made up of vertices, which is at the corner of every edge. We have edges. We have borders. Remember, borders if we have a hole in our mesh. Polygon, any set of closed edges. And then finally the element. And these are all connected polygons. But the reason for this is now I can grab this and I can move the whole thing as a single object. Okay. Real quick, I want to talk about my keeper and kind of the way I made him. Now, he's not finished yet, so he's still in multiple pieces. Select similar. Oh, that didn't work out, did it? That selected way too many different things. There we go. Let me copy this. Because the keeper is so flat, I was able to just go find a silhouette of the keeper. And then all I did was I went to my line tool and I traced it. And I did a better job than I'm doing now.
could you use the Bezier curve with that?
You could. I will show you what I normally do. Now, I don't want to put any more curves in than I have to. Okay? I want to keep my models as simple as possible. So I try not to do a whole lot with the Bezier handles. But let me show you what I would do. So I would trace it all the way out, and I'm going to cheat because I don't really feel like doing that now. and I'm just going to grab this guy. So once I have it all traced out, we can get rid of the shell. This is what I end up with. Now this is made up of, just like everything else, made up of 3 or more sub-objects. In this case, it's vertices, segments. A segment is an edge, and then a spline, which is all my connected segments. But if I come into my vertex mode, I can grab this guy here. Now if I wanted to, I could right click it and say, hey, you're a Bezier corner. And now I can start playing with those Bezier handles if I want to. Okay. But something that's a little simpler, and I'm a big one for KISS. I don't know if you guys know that particular acronym. It's keep it simple, stupid. That's right. Okay, don't overcomplicate things if you don't need to. And we as human beings, we tend to overcomplicate things.
Definitely.
But there's a very simple tool here called the fillet tool, which is going to let me round that out. Okay. So start off with a minimum number of points, and then you can go in and round your edges as you need them. But if you absolutely have to, Avery, you most certainly can come in and change that point type by right-clicking on it, and then you can make it any type. Yeah, I can make it a smooth corner if I want. That's going to round it out, but it's not going to give me the Bezier handles. If I, want to make it just a hard corner, now it's a hard corner again. And again, experimentation is going to be your best bet. Okay, everybody wants to jump in and build their masterpiece right off the bat. Unfortunately, it takes practice. Now, I've had this particular idea for this chess set in my head for like 4 years. There's been a couple of reasons I didn't start it. Number one was the keeper. He's much easier to paint than he is to model, and especially if you just do silhouettes. It's it's a pretty simple shape. This part up here, I'm still not happy with that, but it's close. It's almost what I want. It's kind of got an Easter Island thing going with his head, but but it's a lot of experimentation is my point. Who remembers the multi-sub-object material from last week? Very good. I'm glad a couple of you do.
Only because I got angry.
I'm going to show you real quick how to do your chessboard, okay? Because that tends to give students a little bit of trouble. So I'm just going to start off with a box. Just like most of my modeling, I start off with the most basic primitive that I can, and I go from there. No, that is way more than I wanted. That's kind of big. Let's not do that. There we go. Now there are so many different ways to do this that I'm not saying that you have to do it this way, but it's a good way in the beginning to do things. So number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put that edit poly on here, because that is going to give me access to my sub-objects. I'm going to grab the top polygon. You guys will remember from last week that two of my favorite tools are the inset and the extrude tool. So I'm going to begin just by insetting slightly. That way I end up with a new face in the middle. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to come down here to my polygon material IDs. I'm going to go ahead and leave that set for number 1. And if I press Control I, that's going to invert my selection. Okay, that's pretty much universal. I don't care if you're in Adobe products or you're in Max. Control I is almost always invert. It could be invert selection, invert colors. It could do lots of different things, but it's going to be invert. And I'm just going to go ahead and set these for number 2. So now we can exit out of that. Hit M to go to our material editor. Physical material. Now I happen to be using a slightly different render engine for this particular project. I went ahead and I'm using the Arnold engine. I want you to go ahead and stick with Art for right now, but the materials are the same, so it doesn't matter. So first things first, 2 physical materials, and then my multi-sub-object material. I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 materials and plug them in to the correct slots. Now the key here is I want that pretty checkerboard pattern. And I don't want to have to build that pretty checkerboard pattern. I want something that's already pre-built. Lucky for us, remember, if I want an image to show up as my texture, then I put it into my base color map. So I'm going to go drag from the outs, or drag from the input to anywhere in the work area. Select General. And checker. This is pre-built, and it's just a checkerboard pattern. I'm just going to change the color on this one to something brown, so it looks maybe a little bit like wood. If I wanted to, I could go to textures.com and find myself a really nice wood texture to put on there. But now we're going to apply that. Okay. What do we do if our material doesn't show up? We double click the material to make it active. We hover over these buttons until we find the one that says Show Shaded Material in Viewport. That's not a very good checkerboard. Okay. So we have a fix for that. We're going to use what is called a UVW map. When we apply an image to our model to act as a texture, what Max basically does is it projects that image onto our model. Now, if our object is a simple shape, such as a box, it does a pretty good job. But the problem here is twofold. Number one, it is doing what is called planar projection. So let's look at that. If I bring up my gizmo, it's flat like a plane. So it's shining from the top down. Let's go ahead and change that over to box. Now it's going to shine it like a box, which is better. The other problem is I need that pattern to repeat 8 times. And just so you know, when you're looking at your board, I think I did this properly, but when you're looking at your board from the side, the bottom right-hand corner should be white. And I read that on chess.com the other day. And if you're not sure which color your queen should go on, the way they explained it was, the queen wants to match her outfit. So the white queen sits on the white square. The dark queen sits on the dark square. I did not know that. I always kind of struggled with, where does my king go? The queen wants to match her outfit. I like that. If she's the white queen, you put her on the white square. If she's the darker queen, you put her on the black square. But again, how do I get this to repeat? Well, that's what this U and V stands for, UVW. We're going to increase our U tiling, and it's 8, by the way. So you're going to have it repeat 4 times and 4 times. Now that's not quite right because it centered it, right? And so it's cutting them off. If you were a carpet layer and you did this, you would be fired. So again, that's where the gizmo comes in. I want to grab the gizmo, and I'm just going to drag this over. And then I'm going to drag that up. And so now as I'm looking at this, bottom right-hand corner should be white. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I did not do that enough. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's do 5 and 5. And I'm going to cheat and go look at my other one. 4.2. Let's do 4.2. Make sure you're grabbing the right object. In this case, I need to make sure I got the gizmo. Oh, you're just going to annoy me. So a lot of, I wouldn't say it was sorcery, but there is a fair amount of guesswork that goes into it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. Right. So there's your chessboard. When you make your pieces, make sure that they kind of fit onto your chessboard. Make your pawn first. Make copies of those. As you complete one chess set, then you just make a copy of it and you change the color. Now, I would recommend instances. Do we talk about instances? Have we talked about that in this class? I do get confused sometimes. I want to show you something. When I make a copy of something, when I shift drag, or if I were to, I'll cancel out of that, if I were to control, I believe it's control V. Yes, control V is clone, V is in vary. It's going to give me the option, but I'm going to go ahead and shift drag because that's my preferred method to do it. Now I have options for cloning. I can do a copy. If I make a copy, the clone is completely separate from the original. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this because I don't feel like breaking those. And so now I'm going to make another copy. If I go into my edit poly mode and I grab some polygons here, we'll just grab these polygons right here. When you're working, I do want to bring this to your attention. In the selection rollout, there is a tick box for ignore backfacing. If you tick that, you will not select the polygons on the other side of your model. Sometimes you will do that on accident if you do not turn off ignore backfacing. And just remember, backfacing is simply polygons that face away from you. So now I can come in and I can extrude these upwards. Okay. But that did not change the original. Okay, so that's a copy. It's completely separate from the original. The other most important one is called a instance. So again, if I shift drag and I make an instance, these are basically the same object. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the first one. I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab a bunch of polygons up top here. Oops, and that's what happens when you don't turn off ignore backfacing, is you end up selecting a bunch of stuff you didn't mean to. So let's go ahead and make sure that's Ignore back facing is turned on, and let's do this again. If you do select the wrong objects, like it, for some reason, I keep selecting this top one here, use Alt to deselect it. Okay, so Control clicking adds to your selection, Alt clicking removes that, whatever it is you clicked from your selection. So I'm gonna go ahead and extrude these. Oh, and I've got the bottom too. Lovely. Let's remove that piece. Now, as I increase this, look how it affects not only the copy or the instance, but it also affects the original. So if you make a copy of an object, it is separate from the original. If you make an instance of an object, it is basically the same object, which is useful because if I want to make changes to my pawn here, I don't want to have to make changes to every single one of my pawns. I want to make changes to one of my pawns and have it propagate to all the others. Same with my king, same with my queen. My queen here is an instance. If I were to come in and make changes, watch my queen across the way here. Make a liar out of me. I must have made that one a copy. I love it. Anyway, if you make copies, they are separate. If you make instances, they are basically the same object. Yes, ma'am?
If you've already cloned it, is there a way to go in and change whether or not it's
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can now, if you've cloned it and made it an instance, okay, you can do what is called making it unique. And that's going to be this button right here. Okay, so I have this object selected. Let's do this. So make a copy, make an instance, I should say, excuse me. But then I decide, well, no, I want it to be separate. So I'm just going to click this. Now you can tell it is an instance because it's in bold. See how bold that letter is? So if I say make unique, now they're not bolded letters. All right, so Max that's their way of telling you that this is an instanced object, as it's bold. But like I said, it's depending on what you're using it for. If you've got a lot of copies and they're always going to be the same, make them instances. Because your pawns should always look like the other pawns. So they should never be different. All right.
Do the instances all share materials as well?
No, that is separate. But that's useful. So think of it as if I apply a material to this, I'm doing it to the outside of the object. Whereas if I'm inside Edit Poly and I make changes, then I'm inside that object. And it's the changes inside the object that propagate to everything. It's one of those things that will become clear because you're going to hear the term instance a lot more. The first time I ever heard it was when I took my Adobe Animate class. And it took me a couple of weeks to really wrap my brain around the idea. But then I started to notice that it shows up everywhere. Even in like the Unity, when you're bringing stuff in, they call them prefabs. That's an instance. You take a copy of that prefab and drop it in. Any changes you make to that prefab affect all the different prefabs. So it's kind of the same idea, same concept. Okay. I don't know how I've managed to talk for an hour and not really say a whole lot, but I've done it. Okay. I want you to take your time, and I want you to get in there and think, number one, first off, what is the theme of your chess set? And it can be anything. I have gotten students who gave me 5 different ways to say peace. You know, you got the fingers, and then you've got the shape, and so that was their thing. I had one do a really great chess set based on sea creatures. So her pawns looked like crabs, and I think her bishop was like an octopus looking thing, and did a really good job. So be creative with this. You are more than welcome to do a traditional chess set. I don't want to discourage you. You know, if you are more comfortable doing your typical pawn, rook, knight, bishop, and so on, the hardest piece, of course, is going to be that horse. I would recommend tracing out the shape and then shelling it and then working from there. But this is your opportunity to really just kind of come up with something that's unique in you and reflects your interests. I am a firm believer that you absolutely 100% have to have some sort of inspiration to create, and there is absolutely no shame in using reference materials. You have to use reference materials. You know, drawing like human form is probably one of the hardest things in the world, because you got to get those proportions just right. You know, if the head's not right, then they don't look like a human being anymore. It's like drawing somebody's face. If you get one or two lines out of place, it no longer looks like that person. Same thing with this. So, but this right here, this is a little moneymaker. Who doesn't want a chess set based on their city? You know, I'll sell them at Valentine's Day. You know, it's the day you met. It's the city you met, the love of your life. This commemorative chess set for only $19.95, plus shipping and handling. Okay, people will buy this stuff. I'm not kidding.
So it's three easy payments of $19.95.
3 easy payments, plus shipping. $495. But like I said, if you make your chess pieces simple, and hopefully we can print some of them. I'm looking forward to printing this one. And if you don't want to dive into doing a city, I totally understand that. Like I said, I've had this idea in my head for 4 years now. And I just decided last night on the way home, I'm going to go home and model that chess set. It's only due tomorrow. What the hell?
You made all that in one night.
Last night and this morning, yes. Yeah, but I've been doing this a long time, so once I get the idea in my head of what I'm gonna do, it doesn't take me long to pump it out.
Build it in your head.
Yeah, and I have a real good idea of what I wanted them to look like. I used lots of reference materials. I probably modeled for 2 hours last night, and then maybe another 90 minutes this morning. So about 3 hours to do what you see there. But again, it's not that much, Avery. Don't give me more credit than I deserve. All right, because if we're being serious, and let's just go ahead and grab all of that guy. Okay. Give me 1 second. But if we're being serious, this is the work that I've done. Okay. The rest of it's just copies. It looks really impressive though, doesn't it? Oh my God, that's so many pieces. Not really. It's 4 pieces. 5 pieces, 6 total. But that's the nice thing about the chess set. Now, not to toot my own horn, which I do quite often, but I'm going to do it anyway. One of our students recently got an internship when she graduated here. She got an internship with Flight Safety. Flight Safety is a huge employer. Okay, they build flight simulators to train pilots. Part of that is building 3D worlds for their pilots to fly through. But this young lady, she got hired on as an intern, paid internship, pays $15, $16 an hour, which is nothing to sneeze at in Wichita, Kansas. Guaranteed for a year unless she does something really dumb. Okay, most of our internships are about a year long unless you screw up and get fired. Which it does happen. We have had kids go out there and embarrass us. You know, I had one young man who he worked for Flight Safety, and then he took my classes, and then we sent another kid out there, and Joey, the good kid, I guess, of this story, came to me and he's like, he argues with me about everything. I'm talking about the intern, and I'm like, I don't know, man, I don't know what to tell you. And he's like, yeah, but doesn't he understand that I'm his boss? And I'm like, no, you need to make him understand that you're his boss. But Joey would just like, I can't believe he argues with me about everything. It's like, well, he didn't last, unfortunately, the young man did. But the reason she got the internship was they were blown away by her chess set. And she's the one that did the crabs and the animal life, the sea life. During the interview, they said, oh, well, you built that this semester? And she looks at him, she says, I built that in a week. And it just blew their minds that we ask you guys to do stuff like that. But again, it's 5-6 pieces. So once you have the idea, it's a simple matter. Now, when you're modeling, start with the most vague shape that you can. When I started this building here, this was an intimidating building, I'm not gonna lie. This one in particular was pretty intimidating, that's why I didn't build it in class. Lots of extrusions, lots of booleans, but I just started off with a cube, the right dimensions. So 11 centimeters by 11 centimeters by 28 centimeters tall, which is roughly the dimensions of the building if a centimeter were 10 feet, because that building is 280 feet tall. Okay. But then I started to add just the slightest little details. I tilted the side up. Okay, so now I've got the basic shape. I've got the basic idea. What's next? What is the next biggest thing that you see on this building? Well, these cutouts. Those are Booleaned out of there. I made the shape and I just cut it out, kind of like I did with this one. A lot of trial and error, I'll tell you that. I'm still not real thrilled about the base. Looks okay. Not as organic as I would have liked. This was super easy. Tornado. You guys want to see me make a tornado? So easy. Okay, we're going to start with a cone. And again, if I really wanted to, I could probably start with a cylinder and then put a taper on it. But why would I do that, right? Because I've got this. So, and again, I stress that I would like you to go ahead and use the editable poly in the beginning. You will get to a point where you're more comfortable when you're modeling and you'll just convert to editable poly. Okay, that's a little faster. Problem is, it's permanent. And so you lose a lot of work. But I just basically came in, I grabbed my polygons. Remember, if I hold shift, it's gonna let me grab that whole thing. And I did that. It's gonna let me grab that loop. Of course, I did that one a little better, but you get the basic idea. Now it kind of looks like a tornado. But don't worry about putting in tons of detail. Get the basic shapes down first. It's like drawing. I mean, again, I ask this a lot, but how many people draw? When you draw, oftentimes you just start off with the most vague that almost looks like the shape, and then you go in and you add the details. Another little thing that I find is really useful when I'm drawing and when I'm modeling is I try not to look at the object itself, I look at the space around the object. And that's just a whole new mindset when you do that. Be observant. Look at the pieces that you want to make. Make it, different coffee cups. Make it, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But be creative and have fun with this, because this is a good project. This is an impressive project because, like I said, people look at what you've done and they're like, wow, that is so many pieces. And you just go, yeah, it sure is. Well, it's kind of like what the programmers say. Well, how'd you make that work? And they look at you and go, it's magic. And, that's pretty accurate because, what is magic? Magic is incantations, right? What is coding? It's different incantations. You still need to know how to read them. You still need to know how to write them. But practice, practice, practice. Remember Google, if you get stuck, you are not the first person to have run into that problem. right? And I will not always have the answers. I mean, I have a lot of answers. But oftentimes, my answer is here, let's go Google that. So, take a little break if you need to. You've been listening to me for like an hour. That is long enough. When we get back from break, I will answer any questions you might have. If you are, struggling with something, pay special attention to your lighting. If you need help with your lighting, talk to me. There's lots of different ways to light your scene. I just want to make sure that, most everybody's looks real good as far as I can tell. Like I said, I haven't quite made it back from my camping trip yet, so I haven't done a lot of grading or anything yet. But I will get caught up by this weekend. So, all right. If you don't have any questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.